Welcome, David.
Okay,
Oh, wow.
thank you. Bengal Engineering was awarded the preliminary design contract back in August of 2015. They've been working hard with the water district and the school district and the city to develop the preliminary plans, and those preliminary plans are now done, and they will be used as the basis for the environmental document, which is going to be done by others, because we had to get a project description together using the preliminary plans. So this brings us to the proposal for the final design. This on the screen is not the final layout, but you can get an idea of the layout. Right here you got some lookouts on the bridge, and this is the existing levee trail. That would come up to the top of the bridge, and then the main trail would actually go here and go underneath here. And now I gave this presentation to a joint meeting of the council and the school board, and there was some concern about this. We're now calling it a breezeway. Since that time, we have talked with Bengal Engineering, and we've widened that as much as possible. And so it's about 18 feet wide or so, and we've also put in above it. We put in kind of like a graded skylight, so that will let water and light in there. So it'll be less of a haven in the rain because some water will be coming down there. And like I said, we've met with the school district about 3 times after that initial meeting, and they indicate that they're very pleased with the design. We've also worked our way down 10th Street.
David, for those who weren't at those prior meetings, the tension or the decision point is between having the main crossing be at grade across the road, kind of as it is on where Miller crosses the levee trail, and you have that awkward spot there where pedestrians are crossing not quite at the intersection. You would have something like that. As people came out of the roundabout, there would be pedestrians. The main way for them to cross would be across the road. That's one option, and that's not the option that we're preferring. It sounds like we're going to build what is not really a tunnel, but has some attributes of a tunnel, which is what you see to the right, and that has caused some consternation as well. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, there was concerns because it was a little narrower, but like I said, since then we listened to the council and the school board, and we've widened that as much as possible. Now, say, why can it be wider than possible? Well, because this road is coming downhill and has to meet the existing ground over here. So if you widen it too much this way, you've daylighted out into the road section.
What's the overhead clearance as it's now proposed?
That's a very good question. I have to go by memory, but it's probably like 10 feet. It's high enough so when you're riding on a bicycle,
Ride a bicycle and
you can stand on the pedals and not hit your head.
Okay.
And what this does not show, and I can, if you're interested in another slide, there's going to be pedestrian access from here down to this trail on both sides. So there'll be very good pedestrian access, and again, this will be the main levee trail goes here because the bridge actually touches the existing levee, basically touches it here, because we don't want, because if we made this higher to clear the existing levee trail, it would land down here, and then we could not have this connection to US Parkway. So that's why we went with this one, and that's what we discussed in our joint meeting. And again, we've met with the school district 3 times after that, and they seem very pleased. We've also added 2 apparent drop-off areas along 10th Street, and in this design it also includes, like I said, the 2 bridges and 2 roundabouts, one at Orchard and one that you see here, as well as rerouting the levee trail, the hydraulics, all that is listed in your report. There's a long list of items that are included in in this design.
I don't want to anticipate, but do you have a artist rendition of what the roundabout at Orchard and 10th is going to look like?
Just a second here.
If you're going to get to it, that's fine. I just was hoping to see that.
No, that's fine. It's a big file. So let me zoom in here. So this is Orchard. We don't plan on any right-of-way takes on this side. This side we dip into the school a little bit, and we have crosswalks at all three, and then the sidewalk continues along here. And then down here we have our second parent drop-off.
And that's the bus drop-off you're seeing in the bottom right quadrant of the photograph?
Yeah, down here, that's not quite finalized. We're looking at turning movements, and the consultant has talked with the bus drivers and get their input, and when we're looking at and we're going to talk with the school some more to be what the best circulation within the school is for those buses. And we have the new drop-off zone is over here, as well as we think the primary one will be down here. It'll be longer. Okay. As we go, let me zoom out for you.
And as part of this project, will they be installing the permanent barrier down the median of 10th Street?
Yes, that's what this black line is here. Right here. That is the green is the median, and this black line with the dots is a barrier to prevent people students especially, from crossing. We're trying to force them to cross at the more appropriate locations.
It's an anti-jaywalking device.
That's correct. Very well put. So again, this final design includes restriping this whole thing, putting in those medians and the barrier. The design for these drop-offs. It also includes the design of the pavement maintenance, because we're going to be doing restriping. And so the best way to obliterate the old striping is to do like a slurry seal. And so that includes the design for that as well. So again, the environmental document is going to be done by others, but based on the work already done by Bengal Engineering. And with that, I'll open up to any additional questions you may have.
Well, people are going to say, if the city has the money to do all of this, why don't they repave the streets? So why don't you answer that?
Okay. So this is being constructed by the developer of the development to the west, and it'll be repaid with reimbursed. That work will be reimbursed with the traffic mitigation fees, which has all been paid by the developers over time. So this is really a developer funded project.
It's really being driven by the Glen Loma Ranch project.
Glen Loma Ranch project is the primary one, yes.
To put it simply.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Tucker?
Yes, the previous time you shared this with us, the artist renditions, or the example you chose, clearly shows the tunnel that you're creating here. And I can't imagine any mom or dad that lives on the other side wanting their kids to walk through that. I have many questions. One, did the police look at that as an area that would be a potential area for issues? Two, did the school district, when you say that they agreed that it was going to be an acceptable walking path back and forth, did they come out and really see what it is that you're proposing? I mean, this doesn't show it, but what we saw prior really clearly showed that tunnel that's being created there. And then third, if you didn't have to do a roundabout there, would that tunnel still be created?
Okay, then I can remember all those.
You clearly can see I don't like this. I didn't like it back then, and I don't like it now.
Okay. if we went with the other design where the bridge, instead of, the bridge is uphill here and downhill, there's a hill on this side and it's coming downhill and will touch lower ground on this side, just painting an overview. Right, this particular design, like I said before, it basically touches the top of the existing levee, so it can land on the lower ground over on this side in time, so that this intersection can happen. If we have the levee trail as it is, the levee trail as it is now, instead of rerouting it over here underneath, we have to raise this up quite a bit to have the clearance over the top, and then it will land somewhere down in this area. And so this will be all have a fill slope, so there'll be no way to have a connection with Uvis Parkway. As I mentioned, we made that the breezeway, we made it quite a bit wider. We widened it as much as we could, given the physical limitations. Has the police seen it? No, we haven't brought them into it yet. But as I mentioned, I think I mentioned at the previous joint meeting that I'm proposing to add this location to our park security patrol to try to help prevent issues from happening. Do students have to go through this way? No. They can. This shows that there's a connection for pedestrians and come up this way, and they can come down here and cross to get to school. They can cross here and take this sidewalk down. In no way, shape, or form are they forced to come through that opening.
Okay.
Councilmember Harney.
So I think the possible action here is a motion to award a contract to Pengal for $1.83 million and a contingency fund of $274,000. Why is the contingency fund so high?
It's 15%. That's how it's calculated. There's a lot of issues. Like I said, there's two roundabouts. There's hydraulics. There's recertification of the levee. There's the two bridges. There's a lot of issues. The environmental document has yet to be done. There might be additional changes based on the findings of the environmental document. The consultant does not have permission to just spend that at will. That has to be through a contract amendment. It has to be agreed upon before they do it. So I wouldn't characterize that as, and you didn't, but I just want to reassure you that's not just given away without thought. It has to be required.
It would cover things like if they found an underground river where the roundabout is and had to suspend construction all winter, things like that.
Yeah, this is the design portion. But if they found, in their geotechnical investigation, if they found unsuitable soil or liquefaction or something like that, they could have to redesign, just something unexpected. This firm I've dealt with for a number of years, and they're very good. They're one of the few that don't always spend all the money in the contract, and it's just for unexpected.
So at this point, what percentage of completion do we have on the final design? Are we at 90%, 95%? How far along are we?
We've done the preliminary design. So you're asking how much does that preliminary design get us towards the end of the final design?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if I can give you a percentage, but we've already got this concept approved by the water district, and that was a big deal because of the way it affects the creek, and the Uvis Creek and the hydraulics. They've already done preliminary structural calcs to get which has to be done to get the thickness of the structure, given the length of the structure. It's a pretty long bridge, and where they are able to put the foundation and support columns. So they have to kind of do an iterative process on that, and they've gotten preliminary numbers on that. They've spent a lot of time on geometric layout of the roundabouts, getting the right deflection angles. Our traffic engineer has reviewed it. We've gone over it with the school, and we've made some modifications for that. So and we've also looked at the striping plans. We're well along in the preliminary design. What happens in the final design is you start producing the plans and specifications, all the detail plans. There'll be quite a few sheets for this project, I don't know, 100 sheets. So conceptually, we're well along. We have it pretty well established. But the final design, there's still a lot of work to do.
So what I'm trying to understand here is once Council Member Tucker brought up some concerns, we're still in the preliminary design. You're asking for a 15% contingency to make adjustments and changes. At some point, you'll bring us a final design to review and to approve. Is that correct?
Well, we usually do. I mean, we can. That's not our typical. Generally, we bring you. Well, this is a different situation because the developer is going to construct it, so we won't be coming to you with a award of construction contract. But we can. We also just want to mention we also plan to have some more public outreach, and we've also met. Our traffic engineers met with the neighborhood a couple times at least. So we can give you a progress, and you can attend some of those public outreach meetings to get a better feel for how the community is feeling about it.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
So I heard something there I did not realize. So typically, in a project like this, after it would go out for design, then it would come back, and we would put it out for bid. You're saying that's not going to happen here because the Glen Loma is going to build it.
Right, and that's why, like I said, that is what a typical city project is. But
Right.
Again, I'm saying we can come back to you earlier.
Right,
And
I get that. If we don't modify what you had in mind before Councilmember Harney brought that up, when, if ever, would it come back to us before construction started?
We're still in development of our public outreach, and we would include you in that.
You would come back at the conclusion of that and tell us the results?
No,
during the outreach?
We're still open for public and council input on the project.
So
we have not started final design.
So we'll see this again at a meeting in the future before the design is finalized?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Velasco.
First off, Mayor, thank you for that clarification, because I think it is important for at least the council to have one final look at something tangible in front of us. So thank you for that. I do have a couple other questions. So what is the width of the new, you had said you had widened it. How wide is it?
I believe it's like 16 or 18 feet.
16 to 18 feet?
Yeah.
And you had mentioned that the height is approximately 10 feet high?
Yeah.
Correct. And what is the overall length of, I think you called it a breezeway. I think of it more as a tunnel walkway. How long is that?
Well, here's a cross section of the bridge. All right, here it's 76 feet overall, and that's this from here to here. So it's probably a little bit more than that, because there has to be these things are retaining walls, and so it goes under here.
So are we talking 80 to 90 feet?
80 feet.
80 feet.
Around.
And So during the joint school board meeting, I also had concerns about this, and I know I heard from other council members had some concerns about it. I know that at least a couple of school board members had chimed in about just safety concerns and, lighting, what's going to happen when it starts getting darker earlier, what's going to happen at night. I still have those same concerns. But I think the decision that you're talking about, that the roundabout has to go at that location because it physically can't go anywhere else
Right.
if you want to connect
Uvis Parkway.
Uvis Parkway with 10th Street there. So, while I appreciate the effort to try to make it less intimidating, I guess, I'm still not sure that this is the right project for the city, and I'm concerned that we don't really have any good options at this point. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think it's a good option, but I'm not the council, and I respect the council's collective wisdom. I just want to point out, though, that the breezeway will be fully lit at night. If that makes a difference.
David, the thing that hasn't been discussed and is responsive to the very good question that Councilman Velasco is asking is that the bridge could be built higher.
Yes, I mentioned that earlier.
I didn't hear that, but
Oh,
but as I understand, that's viewed as cost prohibitive.
No. I mentioned a couple times today, as a matter of fact, but as I said, this bridge right now basically touches the top of the levee in order to land, as it were, so we can have this intersection. If we have this up and we just have the regular levee trail go underneath the bridge, it will be more expensive because the bridge would have to extend farther, so you get a longer bridge. But then you don't get this connection of Uvis Parkway and 10th Street. This would become a dead end or a cul-de-sac or something along those lines.
Or elevated, which would be very expensive.
Well, it won't be a roundabout because you can't have you don't want to enter a roundabout on that big a slope. There's a limit to, you can only have it a few percent.
All right. Okay, I'm still not sure how I feel about that. But can you scroll over to the Orchard roundabout, please?
Sure.
Right where your cursor is at, you talk about this new drop-off zone there. That's for presumably the high school, right?
Correct.
Is there an issue with cars pulling into that drop-off zone and then trying to exit as you have cars coming into that roundabout?
Well, like anything, you pull out, you have to be careful, but there's a you enter here, and there's a separation here with the bike lane here. So there's a separation. You just have to check with traffic, and so you enter with the other traffic. And if you don't want to use this one, you can use this one down here. Now this one is a little different design because we have more room. This green area right here, that's a physical curb. And then you have kind of like an airport style where this is your drop-off lane. And when you're dropped off, you don't have to wait in a big long line of cars to exit. You pull out into this lane, just like you do at an airport. And so you can exit, but you still have to watch for traffic. So you exit back into traffic at this point.
Okay. And kind of getting back to a question that, if you answered it, I apologize, but Councilmember Tucker had asked, has the school district reviewed all of this and they are on board?
We met originally with the council and the whole school board. Beyond that, we've met with what's called the facilities committee, which includes the the head of the school, superintendent, and they're the ones who reviewed it. And they are, like I said, they reviewed it, and they seem fine with it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Harney.
Yeah, I'm sorry to come back on this, but this is going to be there's going to be a lot of debate within the community about this. We've got a wall that essentially divides 10th Street, and if you could go back to the bridge portion, so that there is a safety concern there, and I know why we're putting the wall up there. My
As a
understanding is
safety concern.
for safety concerns, so pedestrians don't cross. It's also a beautiful canvas for public art and display, if we only had the commissioners.
The what is that?
The wall could be a beautiful canvas for public art
Well,
or display.
I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about. It's not a stucco wall. It's like a wrought iron. This thing in the middle.
Yes.
It's a wrought
Yeah.
iron. So there's.
So my question is more along coming back to the design review, because the council is now getting into a design review type questions, and you're here for approval of the budget for the final design review and a contingency of 15%. My concern is, when are we taking these designs out to the public? And, the only time I've seen a design for this was in January or February at the Unified School District joint meeting with City Council. Other than that, I haven't heard of any input from the community and it may have happened, but I haven't seen the forums to provide that input. I haven't seen it on Nextdoor. I haven't seen it on our Twitter. I haven't seen any real public outreach. So how are we going to get people to provide their comments, to voice their concerns about some of the safety issues that both Member Tucker and Member Velasco have brought up here? Because I think that's the biggest concern at this point.
Yeah, like I said, the traffic engineers met with the communities a few times. We're going to hold public meetings to take input and discuss the issues. A lot of the parents in the area have requested that the wrought iron barrier in the middle due to recent traffic incidents with kids not crossing well. But we're going to have a series of public input meetings before we continue with the rest of the design.
And the thing that everyone needs to keep in mind is that this is not the 10th Street that it is today. It's when you build 1,700 homes in Glen Loma and you open up all the homes that are Eagle Ridge and all those other homes that are out there to this direct access down 10th Street to 101, it's going to be a much more heavily traveled corridor.
May I interject a few comments? This is really kind of a chicken-egg issue. We do want to outreach the public. We do want to bring this back to council, and we want to bring it back to the school district and so forth. But we need to have the design support. We need to have somebody like Bengal on board that will help us put together the presentation, that will help us put together options, that will look at the various issues that are being brought up tonight, in fact. So we really do need to bring an expert like Bengal on board, hence the decision tonight. We don't necessarily need to take it to full completion. We're not saying that this is what we're going to build. We're not saying that. We're saying we're bringing a design engineer on board. This design engineer is going to help us, support us through this process. We're all in it together. We'll all come back. We'll have discussions with council. We'll have outreach to the community. But we need the design engineer on board in order to do that.
Thank you.
I guess I just would like to follow up with, and I appreciate that you clarified that, Rick. What I would like to follow up is that it concerns me a lot, this whole design. Clearly I said that. But what really kind of concerns me is that it didn't sound like it would have come back before us because of you already have a development agreement with Glen Loma. And with all due respect to Glen Loma, I would like to make sure that whatever this design is doesn't make it cheaper for them and worse for the city that it's a permanent thing in place that will affect us for the rest of the time of the city, but it's being designed just because it'll be cheaper for them in the long run. And that's not where I want to go. So it almost sounded like if we hadn't been asking these questions, it might have gone that way. And so that concerns me a bit.
No, absolutely. We do have an agreement with Glen Loma in the form of a development agreement, as you all know. But that is really a document where we basically, as David pointed out, we're assigned to do the design. So Glen Loma's staying out of that. They're out of that. So the design is up to us. What we want to build out there is up to the city of Gilroy. Glen Loma's on board under the development agreement to build the bridge, but they're staying out of the design aspect altogether.
Councilmember Harney.
Yeah, when this does come back after the design is complete, some of the things that I would like to see in there is what is the level of service at the intersections? What are the response times from the public emergency services? How long is it going to take to travel that corridor where we have, you know, the barrier, the pedestrian barrier up? How are we going to make turns to get back? Those types of analysis, so that we could really understand how this is going to impact the community, both, you know, the people in the school, but also the people in the residential area there. You know, I'm envisioning in my mind somebody making a left turn and speeding to get away, and the police is coming down, you know, westbound down 10th Street and trying to catch him, and he's already clear on the other side. That's a long way to travel, and 101 is right there. So I think these are the types of discussions that we want to be able to have with the public, and say our level of service isn't going to be sacrificed as a result of this. So that's where I'm coming from. I understand the budgetary requests, and I understand the need to get the design and the alternatives out to present. So thank you.
Councilmember Velasco.
Council, I'm prepared to make a motion, and I'm hoping the city administrator might be able to help me out here. So I'd like to make a motion that we recommend awarding the contract to Bengal Engineering for design of the 10th Street Bridge roadway improvements in an amount not to exceed $1.8 million with a 15% contingency. However, I would like to see at some point, I think city administrator and staff has heard our concerns, and I'd like to have them bring us back a design, something that we could really look at and understand. I think there are, you know, again, there is plenty of concerns. I'm having a hard time saying no to this because obviously this intersection with that development is critical. So I'm not sure yet what the right answer is, and I'm a little concerned about, you know, us spending nearly $2 million, but I think we have to move this thing along so that we could actually get something before us. Also, as part of the analysis that Councilmember Harney has raised when it does come back, is the city anticipating doing the public outreach prior to it coming back, or would it come back with a schedule of outreach efforts? I'm not real clear on that.
We don't have a schedule at this time, but it would be before we continued with the final design, because we want input.
So the public outreach would come prior to anything coming before the council?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
And the council would be invited to
Okay.
that session as well.
Okay. So I hope that motion makes sense to everybody. You know, again, I think we have to move forward, but, you know, like many of the voices that I've heard up here, I'm not totally bought into this yet.
Is there any public comment on this item? Any speaker cards? Anyone in the public wishing to speak on this item? Okay, we have a motion and a second. There's no, Councilmember Harney?
Yeah, just further discussion on this, because the motion is for a 15% contingency. And I know you answered or tried to answer my question about why is it 15%? Why is it not 10%? So I would like to better understand that for future projects. Why if this is a matter of city policy, setting projects at a 15% design contingency. I've never seen that. I've always seen a 10% contingency, and I'd rather keep things tighter and come back for further approval if we need more money, rather than the 15%.
I wouldn't say it's a policy. I would say it's more of a practice. We started this 15%. The first project we did it on was less than that. It was because it was a $4.5 million project on the joint trunk sewer main. Again, that was because for unseen conditions when you get a big underground project like that, and we end up using it. But we also had to come back to council because we found a big rotted pipe. But I'd say it's more of a practice, and it's the council can select the percentage. They could put, I'm just giving some options you might think of as, I went with 7% on that project.
Dave, I'm going to pause you because this is kind of off topic a little bit, and we've got a very, very heavy closed session tonight.
Very good.
I'm going to encourage Councilmember Harney to maybe meet with you offline, and you guys can discuss the practice.
Okay, I'll be happy to
If
do
he's
that.
not satisfied, he can bring it back. Is that all right?
Yeah, yeah, we can do that.
Okay,
We'll put
good.
it on a future agenda item.
If you'd like to discuss that policy or practice, that'd be fine. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this?
May I just ask quickly for clarification? The motion, I assume, is actually to award the contract in the amount on the agenda. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay. The wording you used was a little vaguer than that, but I want to clarify it.
Okay.
That's what it was.
All right.
Well, I had said, I think 1.8 when it's 1.830089. Thank you.
The motion is the staff recommendation. So motion and a second. Let's vote. So that passes 4-2.
Unassigned fund balance and reserves in the same sentence, but they are in some instances different. Your policy requires that 20% of annual expenditures are set aside for reserves and that 10% is set aside for economic uncertainty. So total 30% of the expenditures are set aside. And then any funds in excess of those amounts is up to the council to designate those in any manner they see fit. So we by our accounting rules, determine that to be unassigned fund balance because you've got to assign those funds to anything you want to do. You don't have to assign them to anything, but they are there for your use if you're so interested. For fiscal year 2019, which we're not completely done with the audit, but we don't expect the financials to move too much, you have approximately $9 million above your reserve policy. So that's good news, but it also, you then have to prioritize what you want to do with that money, and that's really the discussion we're looking for. Yes?
Jimmy, is it surplus money? It's money we didn't expect to have?
It's not money we didn't expect to have. It's just money that's built up over time. So if you recall, I think when I got here 3 years ago, we had reserves around 45%. So you made a decision at that time to lower that percentage down, and then since that time, we've kind of built it back up. So it's money we haven't spent, but it's also just money that has accumulated over time.
Okay.
Yeah, there was no one time like, hey, here's some money we've gotten or whatever. It just kind of has accumulated. And so, again, the funds are discretionary, meaning the council can use it for any purpose, which in your role is kind of unusual because so many of our funds are, yes?
Council member? Oh.
Okay, because so many of our funds are restricted for what we can do with them.
Sorry, Jimmy, I know I'm a broken record, but I just have to keep saying this for the public, that every time I hear these kinds of presentations that completely ignore the fact that we have this huge debt that we are not able to pay down, it's just something that shouldn't go unmentioned. Everybody needs to continue to remember that we have yet to discuss setting aside anything at all for the $86 million that sits there in unfunded pensions that we know is rising. The current commitment is rising faster than any amount of revenue we can bring in is there, and it is real, and it's something that needs to be addressed. And so every time I hear anyone from city staff talking about money that we have lying around, I need to bring to everybody's attention that it's only lying around if you ignore the liability that's sitting there. Okay, thank you.
The IRS Section 115 trust that we have discussed that would address some of the items that Councilmember Blankley just described is an item that we'll be returning to you next month. And just to give those who aren't too sure what that is, it's funds that may be set aside to address current or future pension cost. They're irrevocable contributions that can either be invested or used to make payments to CalPERS. That is one use of the $9 million that you could consider. But it potentially serves two purposes, and one of the purposes I want to make clear that it does not necessarily do, and I'm going to skip over a spot here, is it doesn't reduce the amount of unfunded pension liability until those payments are made to PERS. So if you put money into a trust and it sits there, and let's say you have $10 million, it does not lower the amount of our liability until we actually transfer that money to CalPERS. So it can serve really two purposes. It can serve as pension contribution smoothing. If you keep money in that fund and you have a year where your CalPERS rates have went up, you can use that fund then to smooth those contributions. And then there is also the opportunity to increase the investment returns that you can get on those funds. With that also comes increased risk loss, which is part of the trade-off for increased earnings.
Jimmy, once the money goes into the trust, can the city, if for some reason, some catastrophic event, pull that money out?
No, it is irrevocable.
It's one way.
It can only be used for pension purposes.
Councilmember Tovar. Excuse me, Councilmember Laurel Munoz.
Thank you. So what would be the benefit of putting the money into the trust versus just paying off a portion of the unfunded liability right away? Is that something we can do?
It is something you can do. You could just make a lump sum payment to CalPERS to lower the liability, but you miss out on the opportunity maybe to get increased earning investments because you've just given it to CalPERS and they're going to invest it the way they want. They can make earnings and such. We have some local control over that, but once it's gone as well. So
Understood. Now, is there a benefit, though, to us as a city for trying to pay that off, even a portion of it, early?
There is, because you will
needed.
save interest charges. But you will not see a reduction in your rates more than likely.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Marks.
Jimmy, I want to thank you for showing us the good and the bad. I really like that in your report. And I also would like you to explain just what you said to Councilmember Munoz, that yes, that money could help lower the rates, but from what I saw, it was over a long period of time, $2 million. Over 20 years, it was about $4.some million, where, in reality, is it really that much? Especially when we have other big capital projects that we need to think about tonight. But anyway, just wanted to say I really like the good and the bad that you presented to us.
This is a chart that was included in your staff report. We presented this, I believe, last year as well, and it shows what happens when you do make prepayment of CalPERS payments. And this is just a $5 million pay down. Depending on how you amortize it over 10 or 20 years, you could save $2 million in interest or upwards of $4.5 million in interest. Again, depending on how much you pay down. That concludes the financial component of how you got to the the $9 million excess. Now, Groom's going to talk to you about some of the outstanding capital projects that you've probably seen over the last few months and are aware that are on the radar. So I'll turn it over to Groom.
Thank you, Jimmy. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Groom Awok, Public Works Director once again. This project, I have 4 projects that I want to share with you as far as capital projects are concerned. As you know, our CIP program, our capital improvements program, contains many more projects than these ones that we want to show you. But clearly, these projects are capital intensive, and they require some sort of cash infusion or capital infusion, which affects the unassigned balance that we just talked about. In the previous presentation, there was some discussion about the 10th Street Bridge when you saw the 4-minute response time with the Glen Loma Fire Station as well as the 10th Street Bridge. You saw the coverage in the response times versus not having the bridge. We had a study session back in 2017, I believe, September 2017. We discussed the project cost, the project elements, and the development agreement that spells out the obligation to the city as well as the obligation to the Glen Loma Corporation that's responsible for the development. To give you a brief summary, the developer's contribution is capped at $6 million. This is according to the development agreement. The project currently is at 65% design stage. The cost estimate is at $20.8 million. Now, one thing to note here is that the project is currently designed with the most ultimate possible configuration. So we are looking at some value engineering options to narrow down the bridge to the bare minimum that's required by the planned development just west of the project site. As you know, the urban growth boundary was put in effect in November 2016. So we're looking at those projections and the traffic flows from the proposed development west of the Glen Loma station to see, do we actually need a width for future 4 lanes, or can we narrow the bridge down to, what's absolutely minimal? And we expect that scope modification to save us $4 to $5 million. So that's one number to keep in mind. The other project, the new fire station, there was discussion a few weeks ago about the fire station and the cost associated with that. There were several options that were considered. There were a few value engineering exercises, but the most recent exercise resulted in a 6,100 square foot facility at a cost of $7.8 million. The estimated budget for this project and the contributions are at $6.5 million, so automatically there's a $1.3 million difference there. That's another number to keep in mind. Another unfunded liability is our deferred maintenance on most of our facilities, but our fire stations are one of the most important facilities that we have. They're essential facilities. 2 of our 3 that were discussed earlier today need both architectural, mechanical, electrical, and structural repairs and rehabilitation. Total combined cost is about $3 million for the Chestnut and Las Animas stations. So $3 million is the third number we want to keep in mind. The fourth project, again, there was a 2 study sessions on this item, the sports park improvements and the expansion and the service area annexation associated with this. I won't go into the details, but the improvements associated with this project would cost us about $3 million. So that's the fourth number to keep in mind. The fifth and last item is the Gilroy Center for the Arts. This item was brought to council a few months ago again. There was a presentation on the expansion that was proposed for this facility and the cost associated with that, which at the conceptual stage is about $3 million. So that's the fifth number I would like you to keep in mind. So summarizing all these major capital projects, again, this is not all the projects we have in our program, but these 5 major projects currently have a deficit in the order of $20 to $21 million based on today's cost estimates and design stages. With that, I'll turn it back to Jimmy. You want to wrap it up?
Thank you, Groom. With that being said, as we mentioned, the city has $9 million in unassigned fund balance. The council can consider potential uses, including an IRS Section 115 trust and all the infrastructure needs that Groom just spoke of. With that, that completes our report, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Rocco.
Gabe, on the ag mitigation for the sports park, could we not use the hillside behind Gilroy Gardens?
Mayor and council, no. The ag mitigation, especially LAFCO's policy, requires a 1-for-1, and it has to be prime ag land. The ag land that we'll be displacing is prime ag land. Therefore, we would have to replace it with similar. just to add to that is LAFCO's policy requires that it be within the city's sphere of influence.
Anybody else? Okay, Shauna, do you have any speaker cards?
I do. Tom Fisher, followed by Mary Yates.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I actually thought I was going to speak twice tonight because these items were separate, and I have two separate issues that I want to speak about. But I'll try to be as brief as I can. On the projects, the funding projects, I'm here to support the Glen Loma Fire Station and the 10th Street Bridge. I believe those two projects are linked and they're important for public safety. I appreciate that the staff has gone through and looked at value engineering the 10th Street Bridge project. But I want to remind the council that, you know, the term value engineering is a little deceiving. Value engineering is taking value out of the project to make it cheap. So, you know, on the 10th Street Bridge, if you take the traffic circles out, you're going to have a traffic impact when the traffic is at its peak. Because now instead of a free-flowing traffic circle, you're going to have stop signs. When you take out the drop-off point for students, it makes it less safe for students. You're just not making it better, you're just making it cheaper. It's the same thing with the divided, center divide in the street with a fence to keep people from jaywalking. You take that out, you increase risk for the pedestrians. So I support the 10th Street Bridge. I really would like to see that built. If possible, I'll support anything as far as getting it built, but I would prefer that you try to do your best to keep all of the features into that bridge. And I know that in the report, it talks about the fact that there's no money in the TIF, which is amazing to me, that there's so much money that comes in with all the development that's been going on. But I think it's important that you find a way to finance this. And I've asked the council to be bold and be creative, and perhaps there are alternatives. Maybe you could do an internal loan and amortize it back over 20 years and pay it back like you did for Gilroy Gardens. It's an alternative. It allows you to take, because it's going to be paid back from the TIF. This doesn't affect your $9 million. This is TIF money. So I ask you to be bold and really pursue that. The second item I just want to touch on briefly is the pension, the IRS trust. I don't quite understand how that works. I was a pension trustee for 14 years for the Plumbers Union, and you know, my understanding of the PERS problem is it's the same problem that we had with our pension, only we addressed our problem 15 years ago. And it's all about your actuarial assumptions and how much you think you're going to make on your money. And you know, we spent 15 years reducing our actuarial assumption from 8% to, we're at 6.25% now. Our goal is to get to 6%. It took 15 years to get there because it's very expensive and it's very hard to do. CalPERS has just barely scratched the surface of that. They're still in the 7s, maybe 7.5 on their anticipated. So, you know, whatever you do here, you're not going to solve this problem. This is not a local problem. This is not a state problem. This is a national problem because pensions everywhere are having this problem. And in the smaller pensions like ours, where we have our own control, we can address it easier than a large operation like a national pension or a statewide pension like PERS. So I would encourage the council to take a different approach and start lobbying your state legislature. And I mean lobbying them hard, because the pension trustees that run CalPERS are not doing their job. And they need to get better pension trustees, people who are actually in there to fix this. And it may take some legislation from the state. And I know that the League of California Cities has been talking about this for years. They're probably doing some lobbying. But every city and every city council member should be out there lobbying their state representatives to get this fixed. You're not going to fix it with this trust. I can tell you that. It's not going to do much for you. So the pension problem is big, and you need to take a different approach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Yates?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. Mary Yates. I've been a resident here in Gilroy now for 37 years, more than half of my lifetime.
You're almost historic.
We're working on it. My house it was built in 1956.
Okay.
I don't think there's been much modification, although I think the original owners, the husband was probably kind of a handyman because there's a lot of different electrical wires going here and there. Anyway, this idea of mine may not come under capital improvements. I'm not really sure, but when I saw this special meeting and this agenda item, actually 2D was what I was originally going to be listed under until you combined them. I wanted to bring it to your attention, and that is the possible, say, renovation or remodeling of the Gilroy Demonstration Garden into a city park. I think this would only cost, or it would cost, I'm sure, several $1,000s, knowing how costs go these days with required, mandatory, whatever you call it, in wages, fair market value of wages, et cetera. But it would cost less than starting from scratch in the fact that your infrastructure is already there. You already have drip irrigation, you already have plant life, you already have a beautiful kitchen area that has a sink, a pizza oven, a new large barbecue with a raisable grill, etc. Turning it into a park could make it a moneymaker for the city in that you could charge permit use fees. And it would also meet your strategic goal number 7, which says that to ensure neighborhoods benefit equally in city services. And under that, it also says that refers to city parks, to provide and maintain parks throughout the city. But there is no park in this neighborhood area. And as you go up as you go south on Eagleberry from 7th Street up towards 10th, you have a lot of apartment buildings. These kids have no place to play except in the street, so this would give them a safe place to play. Plant life sequesters CO2, and if you didn't already know it, I learned the other night from the news that redwood trees sequester 10 times more CO2 than any other type of tree, and we have at least 3 redwood trees there in the garden. It also could provide a ready outdoor area for restaurants to expand their offering to patrons, which would be good for the city's economy and the business owner's economy. This garden is in the neighborhood revitalization area as well as the downtown district. It is a beautification project and ecological project. It was built by the community. It was built by the Leadership Gilroy class of 2010. And a lot of community members have donated their time and funds to the garden over the years. So I think it should remain and benefit the community as it was meant to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Ron Kirkish?
I have to agree with Councilperson Wankley. We have to start seriously looking at what we're going to do to try to effectively work through this CalPERS issue. This is important. It's important not for the community. It's going to be important for the people that work here. We were hoping that recent Supreme Court decisions would help us out, but the court said, no, we don't want to mess around. That's your problem to fix. CalPERS has said, no, we're not going to help you. We're not going to get any help from Sacramento. Sacramento doesn't have any desire to get involved in this. It's a local issue. So I think we really have to pay much more attention to what we do with our local funds to have to deal with this until we know that's somewhere the cavalry is going to come in. But until we know that, we have to be careful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Anybody else? Okay, back to council for, I'm distracted. Andy tells me no, and I got distracted. Back to council for discussion. I'm actually, we have this report here, and Gabe, what kind of direction are you looking for?
Certainly, Mayor and Council, this was informational in nature to bring to your attention. I know we've talked about some of these major projects. I think the next steps would be to bring back the same item at a regular meeting, and Council, you can prioritize in terms of the funding available and give us direction in terms of prioritization of the major projects we have in the queue, or whatever it is you as a council at a policy level decide to how you see best that of assigning the surplus.
Well, I want to be respectful to Councilmember Blankley's request for a discussion on the irrevocable trust. So that's coming back next month, right? Is that accurate, Jimmy? So we need to hear that item, but I don't want to make any kind of decisions in a vacuum where we're just looking at that one issue. So I'm assuming then that all these items would come back at some point after we've heard Councilmember Blankley's item. Is that right?
That's what Council's directive is, yes.
Councilmember Blankley, do you want to chime in? Oh. No. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even see that. Councilmember Tucker.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, no, she's on to me.
So I would agree. I was in the restroom. I don't know exactly what you said, but I can imagine. But I do agree that we need to put some money aside. But what I was going to ask was that first I would like clarification if it's true that the 10th Street Bridge can only be paid for by the TIF or could be borrowed from future TIFs. I know we have developers in queue to be paid back by the TIF. I know that, but I'm just saying in the future. So that in my mind changes what my personal priority would be out of this list of things. But I clearly think at the very least 500,000 or something be put into some sort of trust. That's what I think.
Okay. Councilmember Blankley?
Yes, I just think the timing of the way we're being asked to do stuff is a bit off, because I don't know how to listen to these things and give them any weight without first deciding on what we're doing with this trust. And the trust, by the way, was not my idea. That was something that was brought to us as a possibility. I think, Gabe, you were even the one that introduced it. It's just that we directed, yes, bring it back, and it just has disappeared into the space of wherever things go when there's no time to address them. And we haven't gotten that back yet. So I'm still waiting on that, because although I have no doubt that this is not going to make any serious dent in that liability, and that legislation does in fact need to change, that doesn't mean you pretend it isn't there at all. We have a mortgage. This is like a mortgage, like all of us have. And there's going to be something that we have to pay on it, even if things change and bring it back down. So putting money aside to address it is the smart thing for anybody, especially a government agency that's a fiduciary of the taxpayers' money, and to the employees that have been promised their pensions. I mean, that is what this is coming to. As those costs continue to rise, the cost of employees gets to where we then can't hire as many, which has bad implications for government employees, for their unions, and for those of us who rely on their services. So to not do anything, to me, is absurd. Whether or not you actually take the money and send it off or just put it in a trust is a different discussion, because if it's in a trust, it's at least where you can't spend it on something else, so it's there and it's earning money. So you invest it like you would invest in anything that you're saving, and you get the benefits of those earnings. Or you decide to send it off and it starts cutting your interest now. That's a different discussion. I would just feel comfortable if we just identified, if we all acknowledged that that is real and that we put some money aside for that before we go looking at these other things to do.
Well, okay.
And then I'd also like to ask a question on the 10th Street Bridge, because some of us, maybe all of us, got an email from Bike and Ped saying that something was changed that did not run through them. Is this the time to be bringing that up, or how are we directing staff?
Ask your question.
Okay. So, Groom, are you the one to answer that?
I'll try. What was the question?
The question was, we got an email tonight from our Bike and Ped, I don't even know which one of them wrote it, probably Zach. But yeah, saying that the current design now for the 10th Street Bridge eliminated something that's causing, he says this wasn't brought, it's a change that goes against the goals, plans, and complete streets policy. Have you seen this? It creates there's already a break and continuous trail at Miller Avenue. Let's not create another one right down the street. This trail is Gilroy's recreation spine. Have you seen this email?
No, I have not seen that.
Okay, was there a change made to the design of the 10th Street Bridge that didn't go past Bike and Ped?
No, we have, so the design at 65% is what we have always carried through. What we included in here is what we're investigating currently to modify the scope of the project, and the Bike and Ped would be one of those stakeholders that will have the opportunity to review and comment on these proposed changes. But at this time, we are still investigating these value engineering options and scope modifications to bring down the cost of the project, with the goal of maintaining connectivity between the east and the west, and providing these emergency responses being the prime function of the bridge. So we're using that as the primary target, but also look at the other modes and beneficiaries of the road. So we haven't taken any action to modify the scope of the project.
No, I know, but time is going into something, and he's saying that what staff is currently spending time on, he says it's creating a break in the trail that wasn't there before.
Council member, if I can. Groom hasn't seen it. I'm just reading through it now.
Okay, so I just want to make sure. Yeah.
What I did is I forwarded it over to Gabe and to Groom, and then maybe they could take a look at it and respond and copy the council. Would that satisfy you?
Yeah, I just don't want to take any action tonight that doesn't
No, we're not taking any we're not taking any action.
Action of giving direction, of giving a thumbs up. Okay.
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Just
I'm done.
to provide clarification, oftentimes a lot of commissioners won't include us in emails that go to council. So as Groom said, neither one of us has seen this. However, consistent with council direction from the last study session we had with you related to the 10th Street Bridge, your direction to myself and my staff was to proceed with the bridge as proposed, as presented. So for the record, we have not made any modifications to the plans consistent with council direction. So however the bridge was presented to you back then, it's how we're proceeding. Alternatively, what I've also asked my staff to do is, before we engage an environmental consultant, one of the other things that council you directed us to do was to look for any type of grant funding that would be available. And that would be whether it was state or federal monies that might be available to offset some of that cost. So in going through that process, as all of you know, in order to engage an environmental study at the state level, it's CEQA, at the national level, it's NEPA, National Environmental Protection Act. And in order to do that, you have to have a defined project description. So as part of that exercise of looking for federal monies, we would have to have a project description for us to engage the NEPA level environmental. So as part of an exercise in trying to find a way that we might be able to afford this, yes, I've had my staff do some value engineering and say, okay, what and what are some ways that we might be able to lower that cost, still meet the objective. But again, no changes have been made to the plans. So I'm not sure where this commissioner is getting that information, but as I said, our plans in terms of the bridge itself are consistent with council direction from the last time that we presented to you.
Councilmember Marks.
Well, I think he was as confused as I was because it's different from what you said and what was in the staff report, because there were 10 revisions listed in the staff report on the 10th Street Bridge. And I would hope that before any decisions are made, that we as a council have time to discuss it amongst ourselves to see if we want to see some of those revisions done or pick and choose, and the same with the Glen Loma Fire Station. You know, I guess I don't want the city going in thinking it's a done deal to save money. We are wanting to get rid of some things that we assumed the 10th Street Bridge was going to have, or that we were going to have a smaller footprint for the Glen Loma Fire Station. And it sounds like we will have that time for discussion in future meetings. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Tucker.
I just wanted to follow up with that because actually, if we go back to kind of what Gabe said about prior direction to staff, if I remember, we gave prior direction to staff to go forward with the fire station too, didn't we? And so what did we do with thumbs up on that fire station? Was it the design of the fire station? So let me just say, we don't have a lot of money, but my goal obviously is the fire station, the bridge, the art center, and I would think that the park fund would be able to handle some sort of park thing there. But I don't know. We'd have to look into it. I don't think it would have to come out of this pile of money because parks aren't that expensive. We already own the land. So I would imagine we would just have to finish the master plan for the parks, which that's in queue to be done after the general plan update, and then we could deal with the park. But I'm just saying, those are mine. I just don't know how we can pay for it all, and including, obviously, the sports park is one of my main ones. But there's not enough money in this unassigned money to do all of those things. So I appreciate that you're trying to get grant funding, but in order to do that, then you just have to be communicative to us if you're going to be cutting things, just so that we don't get these kind of emails, because we don't know what you're doing here. And this is the first time I've heard that you're going to try to devalue it a little bit, the bridge. So I don't know. That's all I would say, I guess.
Just for the record, again, we have not changed we have not modified the plans.
Yeah.
The plans of 10th Street Bridge are still consistent as presented to council at the last study session.
Okay.
We have gone through the exercise internally just for our purposes.
You're brainstorming, basically.
Exactly. That's all we're doing.
Okay. And then the same with the fire station?
Well, the fire station, that's more driven because of the economics. And that, as the presentation made to council, we looked at the cost for a approximately 9,000 square foot facility similar to Sunrise, but because there's not sufficient monies, we did scale that back to say, okay, what's a 6,000 square foot facility look like, and what's the cost for that within the budget? So that one we have looked at based on budget. So that one is budget driven, and even the 6,000 square foot facility, we still have a gap in financing in order to build that. At the study session that we presented the various options to council, the 9,000 square facility is more closer to the $10 million for the station.
I remember now.
Of which the developer is only contributing about 33% of that. So we would need to come up with the rest of the money. What we talked with council about was that these fire stations, once we build them, they're there for the next 50 years. So we can do a 6,000 square foot facility, and it's functional today, but the day we make it turnkey, it's already too small to fit our needs.
Right, and that's why we were saying, why would we go with that small of a thing?
Exactly, and that was the council consensus, was to look at the larger facility.
Okay, that's what we did at Thumbs Up,
Yes.
too. Okay, that's what I remember.
Okay. Councilmember Blankley, I apologize if I cut you off. I didn't mean to. I would take your mortgage analysis, though, analogy one step further. It's similar to PERS's we're making mortgage payments thinking we have a certain mortgage rate and a regular payment, but the bank comes back to you and says, you know, instead of making a $1 million loan payment, you now have to make a $1.2 million loan payment. And instead of your interest rate being 5%, it's now 6%. You know, so no matter how much money we're putting into it, Sacramento could always change those numbers on us. And that's what's discouraging for me at the local level, is how much control, no matter how much money we put into it. I'm not suggesting that it's a bad idea. It is something that we should be considering, but my frustration is Sacramento, and I think actually Tom's comments were spot on. It's Sacramento that has this issue, and they are unfortunately trying to solve it on the backs of local government. The other thing I want to mention is, I think that's it, but my only concern is we want to hear this item regarding the fund next month. I haven't completely bought into the idea of putting money into the fund and only to pay PERS, because again, I think that's probably just a spit in the ocean. But I do think that there might be some value of putting some money in there and then using that money to help smooth future years in the event that Sacramento changes our formula some. So that's another conversation that I think we have to have. The other issue I have is I want to make sure that we are having a discussion regarding all of these funding priorities and not just taking one priority, looking at it, because all these things I think are important. But if you just look at one, then you could say, okay, well, let's put money towards this one thing, and then everything else suffers. I think we have to look at all of them collectively, and then as a body, we all make decisions on how we want to proceed. So we want to have your first meeting. I keep saying you, and as you said, you're not the one that brought it. I apologize. It was Gabe that brought it up. So let's have that on the next meeting, and then, or excuse me, next month. And then after that, we'll figure out when all these items are coming back for that future discussion that Councilmember Tucker was referring to.
And can we also get information on the suggestion of there's a financial phrase for it, but interdepartment loaning or whatever, like we bought Gilroy Gardens. Yeah, interfund borrowing.
Okay. Yeah, that could probably be part of the staff
And it
report or
worked.
something.
It didn't work. We still have $9 million owed on that.
But, okay, so it didn't work because some people are not willing to sell Willie House or to sell some of the other assets that we could use to put to that. And nobody's talked about that yet.
All right. Okay, folks, it's getting late now. All right. Anything else from the council? Anything else? All right. Groom, you have any final thoughts?
No, I appreciate council's determination to work on this subject. This is obviously a complicated issue, but we appreciate you taking a look into it. Thank you.
Gabe, do you have any comments?
Yeah, we just felt it was important to bring this topic to your attention, because I didn't want the $9 million to be spent 4 times over in all these projects, so.
All right, good enough. All right, folks, I think that's it. The next meeting is on September 9th. Thank you.